Millionaire thought he was trapped in an arranged marriage, until the bride removed her veil. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's jump into today's story, where a wealthy millionaire thought he was trapped in an arranged marriage. Little did he know, the moment his bride removed her veil, everything would change. But what was it that made this marriage different? Let's find out together. The room was still, the guests' murmurs filling the space as Alex stood frozen at the altar, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. His heart raced in his chest as his eyes locked onto the woman standing before him. She smiled softly, her eyes filled with an odd mix of warmth and something else, a quiet confidence that Alex had not anticipated. She was beautiful, but she was not Sarah. Who was this woman? What was going on? As the crowd waited in silence, the priest's voice echoed in the stillness, breaking the spell. "Is this your bride, Mr. Parker?" The question hung in the air, and Alex's pulse quickened. He felt as though the floor had shifted beneath him, his reality unmoored. He glanced at the woman before him, her calm demeanor in stark contrast to the confusion spiraling inside him. She had no veil, no mask to hide behind, just a soft smile and a gaze that made his heart skip a beat. "I don't understand," Alex finally stammered, his voice hoarse. The woman reached out, placing a hand on his arm gently, as though to steady him. "I know this must be a shock," she said softly, her voice smooth but tinged with something unspoken. "But I'm not Sarah." Alex's mind raced as he processed her words. Not Sarah? Then who was she? Before he could speak, she continued, her expression serious now. "My name is Charlotte. I'm here instead of Sarah. I'm sorry." His eyes widened in disbelief. What was she saying? "Where is Sarah?" Alex demanded, his voice rising with a mix of frustration and confusion. Charlotte's expression shifted slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line, but she didn't hesitate before answering. She couldn't make it. She had a family emergency, and I was asked to step in. It was all arranged beforehand. The room was still, save for the faint rustling of fabric as the guests looked between each other, unsure of what to do or say. Alex's mind felt like it was racing in circles, but his thoughts kept coming back to one simple, pressing question. Why? Why was this happening? Why was this woman, someone he had never seen before, standing here, about to marry him? And why did she look so calm about it? "But this isn't what we agreed to," Alex muttered, his hands trembling at his sides. "My family," he trailed off, his words hanging in the air. "I know," Charlotte said gently, her eyes filled with something almost apologetic. "But sometimes things don't go as planned. You know that better than anyone, don't you, Mr. Parker?" The use of his last name sent a chill down his spine. There was something about her tone, something almost knowing. It was as if she was aware of his life, his world, even though they had just met. Alex's thoughts swirled in confusion, but he couldn't deny the sudden shift in the air. Charlotte, the woman standing before him, was not like the others he had encountered in his life, people who played by the rules, who followed the script. There was an authenticity in her eyes, an unexpected vulnerability, and in that moment, something in Alex's chest tightened. He wasn't sure if it was from fear or something else, but he felt as though he was standing on the edge of something he hadn't prepared for. He opened his mouth to speak again, but Charlotte held up a hand, stopping him. "I know this isn't ideal," she said, her voice soft but firm, "but let's just take this one step at a time. Let's get through the ceremony, and then we can figure out what happens next." Alex stared at her for a moment, the reality of the situation crashing down on him. His life, his carefully planned world, was slipping through his fingers, and in its place was this unexpected, unfamiliar reality. A marriage to a woman he hadn't planned for, a future that was no longer in his control. His gaze shifted from Charlotte to the faces in the crowd, all eyes on him, waiting for him to make a decision. For the first time in his life, Alex felt as though he had no idea what to do next. The priest was watching him expectantly, as if waiting for his response. It felt like a lifetime before Alex finally nodded. "Fine," he said, his voice low but steady. "Let's finish this." And just like that, the ceremony continued, though Alex felt like he was floating through it, detached from the world around him. He tried to focus, tried to remember why he was there, but his mind kept drifting back to Charlotte. Who was she? Why had she stepped in for Sarah? What did she want from him? As the vows were exchanged and the ring slipped onto his finger, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that everything was changing. Nothing would ever be the same again. The ceremony continued, but Alex was no longer fully present. His thoughts were miles away, spinning in circles. The sound of the priest's voice seemed distant, muffled, as he processed everything that had happened. Charlotte, this woman who had stepped in for Sarah, was now his wife, though not in the way he had ever imagined. He tried to focus on the words being spoken, but his mind kept drifting back to her smile, the warmth in her eyes, and the way she had spoken so calmly, so confidently, when everything had turned upside down. As the vows were exchanged, Alex barely registered the words coming from his mouth, the motion of slipping the ring onto her finger feeling surreal. This wasn't the life he had planned. This wasn't the woman he had thought he would marry. But something about Charlotte, something deep inside him, began to stir. He could see it in her eyes. She wasn't here by accident. She wasn't here for the money, or the status, or any of the things that had always driven the women he had encountered. She was here because she had her own reasons, her own story. When the ceremony finally came to an end, the guests began to mingle and congratulate them. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something had changed. As the reception unfolded around him, Alex found himself standing at the edge of the crowd, his thoughts still clouded, his head spinning. Charlotte, however, seemed unaffected. She moved through the guests with grace, laughing softly at their jokes, chatting effortlessly with strangers. She was composed, calm, and yet there was something about her that made Alex uneasy. She was unlike anyone he had ever known. It wasn't that she was unkind or cold, far from it. She had warmth in abundance, but it was the way she held herself, the way she seemed so sure of her place in the world, that unsettled him. It made him feel small in a way he hadn't felt before, and he didn't like it. For the first time in his life, Alex was forced to confront a feeling he had long buried: vulnerability. But as the night wore on and he watched Charlotte move effortlessly among the guests, a part of him was drawn to her. He couldn't deny it. There was a quiet power in her that made him want to understand her, to know her story. When the music played and people began to dance, Charlotte excused herself from the group she was speaking with and made her way over to Alex. "Would you like to dance?" she asked, her voice soft but certain. Alex hesitated for a moment, but something in her tone, in her presence, made him nod. They moved onto the dance floor, the music surrounding them as they swayed to the rhythm. Alex wasn't a dancer, but somehow he felt comfortable in her arms, even though everything about this situation felt wrong. "You're not what I expected," Alex said, his voice low, his hand resting on her waist as they moved together. Charlotte smiled, her eyes lighting up with something almost playful. "I could say the same about you." Alex furrowed his brow, unsure what she meant. "What do you mean?" he asked, genuinely curious. Charlotte's smile softened as she looked at him, her eyes warm. "You're more than just the businessman everyone thinks you are. I can see it." Alex blinked, thrown off by her words. "You don't even know me," he replied, his tone guarded. "No," she agreed, "but I can tell." She paused for a moment and then added, "You're not as detached as you want everyone to believe." The words hit him harder than he expected, a quiet truth he hadn't been able to admit to himself. He had spent so many years building walls around his heart, around his life, that he had forgotten how to let anyone in. But there was something in Charlotte's gaze, something in the way she held him, that made him question everything. "I don't know what you want from me," Alex said, his voice strained. "But this marriage, this whole thing, it wasn't what I wanted. You weren't who I thought I was marrying." Charlotte's eyes softened, and she took a step back, her hands slipping from his shoulders. "I never wanted this to be easy," she said quietly. "And I'm not here to make your life easier. But I am here because I believe we both have something to offer each other." Alex swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. He didn't know what to make of this woman, this strange twist of fate that had brought them together. But he couldn't deny that a part of him wanted to know more. "You have no idea how hard it's been," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been living my life for everyone else, my family, my company, my name. I don't know who I am anymore." Charlotte studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Then maybe it's time you found out," she said simply, before walking away, leaving him standing there, feeling more lost than ever before. The night seemed to stretch on forever. the music still playing softly in the background as Alex stood there, watching Charlotte walk away. Her words echoed in his mind, pulling him in directions he wasn't sure he was ready to go. Maybe it's time you found out who you really are. The weight of her statement pressed on him like a stone lodged deep in his chest, a reminder of everything he had buried for so long. He had spent years building a life that was solid, predictable, and most importantly, controlled. But now, in this moment, nothing felt controlled. He had married a stranger, a woman who wasn't supposed to be there, and yet, somehow, it felt like she was the one who held the answers to everything he had been avoiding. As the music swirled around him, Alex took a deep breath, his eyes following Charlotte as she rejoined the group of guests. She was laughing, talking to people with ease, her presence commanding the attention of the room. It was hard to ignore how she seemed to belong here, how she fit into this world effortlessly, while Alex felt more and more like an outsider in his own life. His mind drifted back to earlier in the evening, when he had felt that strange pull toward her the way she had looked at him, as though she saw through all the layers he had carefully built around himself. What did she see? Was it possible that she could understand something about him that even he hadn't figured out yet? As the night went on, Alex found himself watching her more and more, unable to shake the curiosity and growing fascination that was beginning to take root inside him. He couldn't explain it, but there was something about Charlotte that was drawing him in, making him want to understand her, to know her story. And yet, at the same time, there was a part of him that wanted to push her away, to keep things distant and professional, just like everything else in his life. But could he do that? Could he really keep this marriage, this connection, purely business? His thoughts were interrupted as Charlotte approached him once again. This time, she was no longer with the guests, but standing alone by the balcony, gazing out at the city lights. She didn't notice him at first, but when she did, she smiled, a small, knowing smile that made his heart race. "You're still here," she said, her voice light but with an underlying depth that made Alex pause. "I thought you might have disappeared into the crowd by now." He took a step closer, his hands in his pockets, unsure of what to say. He wanted to ask her so many things, but he wasn't sure where to begin. "I couldn't leave just yet," he replied, his voice quieter than he intended. Charlotte glanced at him, her gaze softening as if she could read the uncertainty in his eyes. "I know this isn't easy for you," she said, her voice gentle. "But I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Alex swallowed hard, trying to push back the frustration that was bubbling up inside him. "How can you say that?" he asked, his voice a little more strained than he'd meant. "This wasn't supposed to happen. This marriage, this whole thing, it was supposed to be a business deal, nothing more." Charlotte took a step closer, her presence filling the space between them, and for a moment Alex couldn't breathe. He had never been this close to her before, and yet it felt as though they had known each other for much longer. "Business deals don't work like this," she said quietly. "You can't force something real to happen. It either does or it doesn't." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time that night, Alex felt the walls around him start to crack. He had spent so many years hiding from the truth, convincing himself that the only thing that mattered was success, money, and control. But now, standing here with Charlotte, he realized how hollow that all felt. He didn't want this anymore. He didn't want to live a life that was so empty, so distant. But he didn't know how to change. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't even know me." Charlotte's smile softened, and she placed a hand gently on his arm. "I don't need to know everything about you, Alex," she said. "I just need to know that you're willing to let go, to let something real happen, to take a chance on something that's not controlled, not planned, not part of the script." The words hit him like a wave crashing into the shore, and for a moment, Alex felt like he might drown in them. He had spent so long following the script, doing what was expected, that he had forgotten what it felt like to truly live, to experience something beyond the walls he had built around himself. Charlotte's eyes held him, steady and unflinching, as if she could see through all of it, all the defenses he had spent years constructing. And for the first time, Alex wondered if maybe she was right. Maybe he was exactly where he was supposed to be. "I don't know if I can do this," Alex said, his voice breaking slightly as he looked away, his gaze lost in the city lights. "I've never been good at letting go." Charlotte's hand remained on his arm, warm and comforting. "It's okay to be scared," she said softly, "but you don't have to do it alone." The weight of her words settled over him, and for the first time in a long time, Alex allowed himself to feel something other than fear. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected marriage, this unexpected woman, was exactly what he needed to find out who he really was. As the night stretched on, Alex stood there, looking out at the city with Charlotte by his side, feeling something new stir within him, hope, maybe, or the beginnings of something even more profound. As the weeks passed after the wedding, Alex found himself in a constant state of inner turmoil. What had started as an arrangement, a cold, business-like contract, was slowly becoming something else. Charlotte, his new wife, was nothing like the women he had known before. She wasn't interested in his wealth, his status, or the things that everyone else seemed to value. She didn't look at him like a businessman or a millionaire. She looked at him like a person, a man with flaws, with a past, and with the potential for something more. He hadn't been prepared for that. She had an uncanny ability to see through the walls he had built around himself, and that was terrifying. It wasn't that he didn't want to change, it was that he didn't know how. His life had been built on control, his business, his family's expectations, his own carefully planned future. He wasn't used to uncertainty, to living without a script. Yet, every day with Charlotte seemed to be a lesson in letting go, in allowing things to unfold naturally, without his usual need for control. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. It wasn't long before Alex began to notice the small things. Charlotte was kind in ways he hadn't expected. She would leave him notes, small gestures of thoughtfulness, things like making his favorite tea just the way he liked it, or surprising him with a book she thought he would enjoy. He was shocked to realize that, despite the formality of their arrangement, she had been paying attention to him. She was thoughtful in a way that no one had been in his life for years. And with each small act, Alex began to question everything he thought he knew about relationships. But it wasn't just the little things that were changing. There was something else, something deeper that was beginning to stir inside him. Charlotte had made him feel things he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Vulnerability, trust, connection. It was foreign, and yet it felt strangely right. One evening after dinner, Charlotte suggested they take a walk through the garden. It was a cool night, and the stars were scattered across the sky. Alex, who typically preferred to retreat to his office or the comfort of his private spaces, found himself agreeing without hesitation. As they walked together, side by side, Charlotte spoke about the things that mattered most to her family, kindness, and the simple joys in life. She didn't care about the things Alex had spent his life chasing. She didn't care about wealth, status, or the things that defined success in his world. "It's strange," she said, looking up at the stars, "how we all get caught up in the pursuit of things we think will make us happy. And yet, when we finally get them, we're left feeling empty." Alex, walking beside her, could hear the sincerity in her voice. He felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. "Do you think that's what's happening to me?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. Charlotte glanced at him, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Maybe. But I don't think you're as lost as you believe." Her words struck him harder than he expected. "I don't know what to do with all of this," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't know how to let go of everything I've spent my life building." Charlotte stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression serious but understanding. "You don't have to let go of everything, Alex. Just the things that are holding you back." Her words were simple, but in them, he felt the weight of the truth. He had spent so many years clinging to control, to the idea that success was the only thing that mattered. But now, standing here with Charlotte, he realized that maybe there was more to life than the things he had always valued. Maybe there was something worth fighting for, a connection, a partnership, a love that wasn't dictated by business deals or family obligations. "I don't know if I can do this," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "I don't know if I can change." Charlotte reached out and gently took his hand in hers, her grip steady and warm. "You don't have to change overnight," she said softly. "You just have to be willing to try." Alex stood there, staring at her, feeling something shift inside him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of the unknown. Maybe it was because Charlotte had shown him that there was more to life than control and success. Maybe it was because, for the first time, he felt seen not as a businessman, not as a millionaire, but as a man. And in that moment, as they stood in the cool night air, Alex realized that perhaps the most important thing he could do was stop trying to control everything and simply let life unfold. With Charlotte by his side, maybe, just maybe, he could find the freedom to be himself, to let go of the past, and to embrace a future he had never even imagined. As they walked back inside, hand in hand, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of peace he had never known. Maybe Charlotte was right. Maybe he didn't have to let go of everything. Just the things that were holding him back. As the days turned into weeks, Alex found himself increasingly unsettled by the changes that were taking place in his life. The walls he had so carefully built around himself were slowly crumbling, and every interaction with Charlotte seemed to chip away at the fortress he had spent years constructing. It wasn't just the little gestures, the tea, the notes, the conversations that stretched late into the night. It was something deeper. Charlotte had a way of making him feel seen, truly seen, in a way he had never experienced before. He wasn't just a business mogul, a successful entrepreneur, or the heir to the Parker legacy. To her, he was Alex. He was human. But that thought, though comforting, also terrified him. He had spent so many years convincing himself that success and control were all that mattered, that they defined him. And yet, with every passing day, Charlotte seemed to be showing him that there was so much more to life than that. It wasn't until one morning, a few weeks after the wedding, that Alex realized just how much his perspective had shifted. He was in his office, going through the usual pile of paperwork, when his assistant brought in a stack of contracts. As he flipped through them, a sense of unease settled in. These contracts, the deals he had always prided himself on, now felt empty, meaningless. It was as though the world he had worked so hard to build was no longer the world he wanted to live in. But what else was there? What was the next step? The answer, he realized, had been right in front of him all along. It was Charlotte. It was her belief in him, her quiet strength, and her willingness to love him despite his flaws that had begun to shift his world. She hadn't asked him to change. She had simply allowed him to be himself, without judgment, without expectations. It was a gift he had never known he needed. That afternoon, Alex left the office earlier than usual, something he rarely did. He drove home with a sense of urgency he couldn't quite explain, his mind racing with thoughts of Charlotte. When he arrived at the house, he found her in the garden, as usual. She was tending to the flowers, her hands moving gracefully as she carefully pruned the roses. There was something about the way she moved, so focused and peaceful, that made Alex feel as though the chaos in his own life was finally starting to settle. He watched her for a moment, taking in the sight of her calm, her beauty, and the way she seemed at ease with herself. It was in that moment that Alex realized something. He had been living his life in constant motion, constantly striving for more, always seeking the next big thing. But Charlotte had found peace in the small, simple moments. It wasn't about the grand achievements or the accolades. It was about being present, about finding meaning in the everyday. He walked toward her, and as she looked up, she smiled, the same soft, understanding smile that had disarmed him from the very beginning. "Hi," she said, her voice light but warm. "How was your day?" Alex hesitated, his usual guard coming up as he prepared to give the typical response. "Busy," he started, but then he stopped himself. This wasn't the response he wanted to give her, not anymore. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice quieter now. Charlotte raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Thinking about what?" she asked, setting down the pruning shears and turning to face him. Alex paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "About us," he said simply. "About what this marriage really means, and about what I want out of life." Charlotte's expression softened, and she stepped closer to him, her eyes searching his. "And what do you want?" she asked gently. Alex took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest as he realized the answer had been within him all along. "I want to build something with you," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I want to build a life that's not just about business deals or success. I want something real, something with you." The words felt foreign on his tongue, but as soon as they left his mouth, he realized how true they were. Charlotte's eyes sparkled with something he couldn't quite place: relief, perhaps, or hope. She reached out and took his hand, her grip warm and firm. "I've always believed that people have the ability to change, to grow, to become the best version of themselves," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "And I think you're already on that path, Alex." Alex felt a rush of gratitude wash over him, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Standing in front of Charlotte, with her by his side, he realized that life didn't have to be a constant pursuit of control and success. Sometimes, the greatest accomplishments were found in the most unexpected places, the quiet moments shared with the people you loved, the connections that made you feel whole. "I'm ready for that," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm ready to build that life with you." Charlotte smiled, a genuine, soft smile that made Alex's heart swell. "Good," she said, squeezing his hand. "Because I've been ready for a long time." As they stood together in the garden, hand in hand, Alex knew that this was only the beginning. The life they would build together would be nothing like the one he had known before, but it would be more real, more fulfilling, and more meaningful than anything he could have ever imagined. The days that followed felt different, lighter somehow, as if a weight Alex had carried for years had been lifted. With each passing moment, he found himself drawn more and more to the life Charlotte was offering him, one that wasn't bound by the suffocating expectations of success and control. He wasn't used to it, but he couldn't deny how much he longed for it. There were still moments of doubt, moments when his old fears crept in, telling him that he wasn't doing things the right way, that he was taking risks he couldn't afford. But whenever Charlotte was near, those doubts seemed to fade, replaced by something stronger, something real. Together, they had begun to build a life that Alex had never imagined for himself, one that didn't revolve around business deals, but around genuine connection, honesty, and a deep sense of trust. Charlotte had a way of making him feel like he was enough, just as he was, and that had changed everything. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the garden, Charlotte took Alex by the hand and led him toward the small bench they had placed by the old oak tree. It was a place they had often sat together, talking about everything and nothing. The place where Alex had first realized how different this marriage was from anything he had expected. "I've been thinking," Charlotte began, her voice soft but steady. Alex looked at her, his heart beating faster. He had come to understand that when Charlotte said she had been thinking, it usually meant something important was coming. "About us?" she continued. "About the future." "What about it?" Alex asked, his voice low, his curiosity piqued. Charlotte paused for a moment, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made him feel like she could see right through him. "I've been thinking about how much we've changed in such a short time," she said. "When we first got married, I had no idea what to expect, and I don't think you did either." Alex smiled, a bit embarrassed. "No, I definitely didn't. I thought it was just going to be a business deal." "I know," Charlotte said with a chuckle, "and I think we both thought we would just go through the motions, not really letting anything in. But we've both let something in, haven't we?" She looked down at their intertwined hands, a soft smile playing on her lips. Alex took a deep breath, his heart swelling with the weight of her words. "We have," he agreed, "more than I ever thought possible." Charlotte turned to face him fully, her gaze steady, full of warmth and sincerity. "And I've been thinking about what comes next," she said. "What kind of life we want to create together, beyond this house, beyond the business. A life that's truly ours." Alex's heart began to race. He had never considered what the future could look like beyond the confines of his old world. He had always been so focused on the next deal, the next goal, that he had never stopped to think about what he truly wanted from life. But with Charlotte, he was beginning to see that there was more to it than just achieving success. There was love, connection, and the possibility of building something real and lasting. "I want that too," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to build something with you, Charlotte. Something that's not about expectations or obligations, but about us, about our own dreams." Charlotte smiled, her eyes lighting up. "I knew you'd say that," she said with a teasing tone, but there was something deeper behind her words. "I've been thinking about it too, and I think we both need to figure out what we really want, what we really need, and then we can go after it, together." Alex nodded, his heart full. It was a strange feeling, to want something so much, and yet feel so uncertain about how to get it. But with Charlotte by his side, he felt like he could face whatever came next. "I'm ready," he said quietly. "I'm ready to build a life with you, Charlotte. A real one." Charlotte's smile softened, and she leaned in, her lips brushing against his in a kiss that felt like a promise that they would face whatever came together, as partners, as equals. As the kiss deepened, Alex felt a warmth spread through him, a warmth he had never felt before. It was the warmth of knowing that he was no longer alone in this. He had Charlotte, and together, they were building something that neither of them had ever expected, but both of them had always needed. When they pulled away, Charlotte rested her head against his shoulder, her breath soft against his skin. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," she said with a smile, "but I think we're ready for it." Alex smiled, holding her close, the weight of the world feeling lighter than it ever had. "We're ready," he agreed. "Together, we're ready for anything." And in that moment, Alex realized that the life he had once feared, the life without control and certainty, was the life he had always been meant to live. With Charlotte by his side, he was no longer afraid of the unknown. He was ready to embrace it, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. As the weeks passed, Alex and Charlotte's connection deepened in ways neither of them had expected. Their relationship, once rooted in business and obligation, had slowly transformed into something real, something built on mutual respect, trust, and for the first time in his life, love. Alex had never imagined that he could feel so vulnerable, so open to someone else. But with Charlotte, it felt like the walls he had spent years building had come down, piece by piece, until he was standing before her, no masks, no pretenses, just himself. He hadn't known it was possible to feel this way, to feel so free, yet so grounded at the same time. Charlotte, in her quiet strength, had become the anchor in his life, the person who made him believe that there was more to life than what he had spent years pursuing. It wasn't about wealth, success, or power. It was about connection, understanding, and the simple joys of being present. One evening, as they sat in the living room together, Charlotte's head resting on his shoulder, Alex turned to her with a sense of clarity he had never had before. The weight of everything he had been running from his past, his family's expectations, his fear of failure felt lighter now, as if it no longer had a hold on him. "I've been thinking," Alex said, his voice quiet but firm. Charlotte looked up at him, her eyes warm and encouraging, always ready to listen. "About what?" she asked, her voice soft, almost like a whisper. "About how much I've changed since we've been together," Alex continued, his voice steady now, as he gathered his thoughts. "I used to think that success was everything, that being the best, having more than everyone else, that was what mattered. But now, I see things differently. I see what truly matters." Charlotte's expression softened as she reached out, gently placing her hand on his. "I'm glad you see that," she said with a smile. "You've always had so much potential, Alex. But you had to see it for yourself. You had to find your own way." Alex swallowed hard, feeling a surge of emotion rise in his chest. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted, his voice thick with gratitude. "You made me see what I was missing, what I was too afraid to face. I was living my life for everyone else, trying to live up to their expectations. But now, I'm living for myself. And for us." Charlotte's eyes sparkled with pride and affection as she squeezed his hand. "And I'm proud of you," she said softly. "You've come so far, Alex. You've taken the first steps toward building a life that's truly yours, and I'm so happy to be a part of it." Alex leaned forward, his heart racing, as he placed his hand on hers and looked into her eyes. "There's something I've been wanting to say," he began, his voice full of emotion. Charlotte's gaze never left his, her expression open and understanding. "What is it?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. Alex took a deep breath, his chest tight with anticipation. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Charlotte. Not because it's expected or because it's the right thing to do, but because I truly want to. I want to build a future with you, to face everything that comes our way, together." Charlotte's breath caught for a moment, her eyes widening in surprise, and then she smiled genuinely, deeply, as if his words had been the missing piece she had been waiting for. "I want that too," she said, her voice filled with certainty. "I want to build a life with you, Alex. A real one, with all the ups and downs that come with it, but we'll face it together. I believe in us." Alex felt a rush of emotion as he reached out to pull her into his arms. This was it. This was the life he had always dreamed of, real, raw, and full of love. They had come so far, and yet, in that moment, it felt like they were just beginning. For the first time in his life, Alex felt like he was truly living, not just existing. Charlotte had shown him that life was about more than just chasing success. It was about living with purpose, with intention, and with the people who mattered most. As they held each other in the quiet of the room, Alex realized that the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, with moments of doubt and fear. But as long as he had Charlotte by his side, he knew they could face anything. Together they had built a foundation that was unshakable, a bond that could not be broken. And that, to Alex, was everything. "I love you," he whispered into her hair, his voice soft but full of meaning. "I love you too," Charlotte replied, her voice steady and sure. And in that moment, as they held each other in the stillness of the evening, Alex knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where they would face the world together, hand in hand, no longer afraid of what the future might bring. Months passed, and with each one, Alex and Charlotte continued to grow together, their bond stronger than ever. The life they had begun to build was far from perfect, but it was more real than Alex had ever thought possible. He was no longer chasing after things that didn't matter, no longer trying to prove himself to others. He was living for himself, for Charlotte, and for the future they were creating together. The business deals, the meetings, the events, all of it seemed less significant now. Alex had learned that life wasn't about wealth or power. It was about the moments in between, the quiet evenings spent with the person you loved, the small acts of kindness that built a foundation for something deeper. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the trees, Charlotte took Alex's hand and led him outside. They walked together through the garden, where flowers bloomed in brilliant colors, and the air smelled fresh with the scent of spring. As they reached the edge of the garden, Charlotte turned to face him, her eyes sparkling with the same warmth and confidence that had drawn him to her from the beginning. "I've been thinking," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight of both uncertainty and hope. Alex stopped walking and looked at her, his heart catching in his chest. "About what?" he asked, already knowing that whatever was coming next would change something, just like everything else had since they'd met. "About how far we've come," she replied, her hand still resting in his. "When we first got married, I never imagined we'd be here, like this, so connected, so real. But now, I can't imagine my life without you, and I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next." Alex's heart raced at her words, a sudden wave of emotion crashing over him. They had come so far together, and yet, in this moment, it felt like they were standing on the edge of something even greater. He had never thought he would be here, in this place, with her feeling so much, so deeply, and yet so sure of where he was. "What do you see in our future?" he asked, his voice quiet but full of emotion. Charlotte smiled, her eyes softening as she looked at him. "I see a life built on the same things that brought us here: trust, love, and the freedom to be who we really are. I see us continuing to build this life, step by step, with all the challenges and joys that come with it. But most of all, I see us always having each other, no matter what." Alex felt a lump form in his throat, the weight of her words making everything else fall away. He had spent so many years running from the things that mattered most, but now, standing here with Charlotte, he realized that this was what truly mattered. "I want that too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want a future with you, Charlotte. A real one. A life where we don't have to hide behind anything, where we can just be ourselves. No expectations, no pressure, just us." Charlotte's smile deepened, her eyes shining with love. "That's all I've ever wanted, Alex," she whispered, stepping closer to him. "Just us." They stood there, the world around them fading into the background as they held each other in the quiet of the garden. It felt like the beginning of something new, something they had built together. And in that moment, Alex knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. With Charlotte by his side, he wasn't afraid of the future anymore. He wasn't afraid of the unknown. Together, they had created something beautiful, something lasting. As the sun set in the distance, casting a warm glow over the garden, Alex felt a sense of peace settle over him. This was the life he had always been meant to live, a life with love, with purpose, and with Charlotte. And for the first time he was truly content, knowing that the best was yet to come.